everybody. Welcome to session 4. Today we are going to talk about some of the barriers to customer service. I have 8 total. Today we're going to talk about 4. We're going to talk about language choices, pet peeves, first impression, and listening. 4 barriers to customer service today. Language choices. This is very interesting because all of us within our industries and even within particular organizations have specific language that you use every day that is absolutely comfortable for you, but no one else understands it, as evidenced by this cartoon. And so many fields have their own language. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And I want you to be careful and be aware of jargon. And again, jargon is words that you use every day in your industry, and it works for you. But it's very interesting how confusing it can be for other people and how people respond to it.
A friend of mine who's a CEO told me a great story about jargon. And she said that she had a family who came into her office absolutely irate. And she brought them in, asked what the problem was, and they said, "We heard one of your nurses saying that a patient fell on the floor and they were ready to move her after a few hours," and sat and looked at her. She goes, "Yes." They said, "Are you kidding? Someone falls on the floor and you wait hours before you move them?" And they thought that floor meant the linoleum. And the floor actually means the department. So you can see how when people don't understand jargon, it can get really ugly.
Here's another example. I was working in a hospital, and I said, let's talk about the jargon or acronyms you use. And they said SOB. And I go, that is not hospital. Everybody uses that. And they go, really? Are you talking about shortness of breath? And I went, oh, no, actually, I wasn't thinking about shortness of breath. So I said, that's even more important because SOB means different things to different people. And if I saw SOB in a chart, I would be very hurt. I did a training for an HR association, and I was showing all of these different slides, and I want to show a few of them of the acronyms they use. So they use the word AA a lot, and for a lot of people in the world, AA stands for Alcoholics Anonymous. For them, it is affirmative action. When I hear COBRA, this is what I think. They think of it as something very different having to do with insurance. When they say COLA, which is their cost of living adjustment, this is what I think of. So again, very different. Short-term disability, which I'm sure all of you immediately thought when you saw this slide. So interestingly, what research shows is if you are using jargon or acronyms to a person who is highly educated, they're not going to ask you what you mean because, excuse me, I have a PhD. I'm certainly not going to ask a medical assistant what that means. Research also shows if you are poorly educated, you're too intimidated to ask them what they mean. So let me show you this. And basically what happened, I was having a charter chat, and she asked me if I wanted to port in my AT&T phone number. And I said, what does that mean? Keep it? And she goes, what do you mean? That was never stated in the chat. And I said, wow, you said you want to port it in, and I asked, what does it mean, keep it? And she said, yeah, that's what I meant. And I wrote, I do want to keep it. I'm not familiar with the term port in. It's an industry term, and I'm not in your industry. Perfect example, because she got annoyed with me. I was annoyed with her. Just say, do I want to keep the phone? Port in made no sense to me. Okay, let me tell you a story and a response that a woman gave saying, it's the law.
I was waiting at my doctor's office and an elderly woman was pushed in by her husband and was upset because normally she would just call in for a prescription refill for a narcotic and they wouldn't do it this time. So the receptionist replied to the woman, well, it's the law. No explanation, and the woman was very upset. So when I got into the office, I asked my doc what was going on, and he said, well, it is a new law. I said, then you need to explain it, because just saying it's the law is absolutely going to put the other person on the defensive.
So what this was, it was a trigger word or was a trigger statement. And when someone uses a trigger word or a statement, it's going to immediately put the other person on the defensive, and it's generally going to have them immediately stop listening. One of the biggest trigger words you can use is policy. As soon as you say to me, it's our policy, I'm immediately getting defensive. Another one is you, especially when it's followed by constantly, never, and always. As soon as I hear you always, I immediately am thinking, no, last June I didn't, because I'm on the defensive and I stopped listening. So be aware of trigger words. These are very common. One of my worst is whatever. When I taught college, I actually had in my syllabus, do not say whatever. Drove me crazy. With all due respect signifies zero respect. A few others, correct me if I'm wrong, again, they do not want correction. And the next two fall into the whole category of, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but, and this is what I say, then don't say it. Because anytime anyone starts with, don't take this personally, I don't want to be mean, they're going to be mean. So let me ask you, what do you think are the two most dangerous words that you can use to throw more fuel on the fire? And a lot of people guess it is this. And they're absolutely right. As soon as you say calm down, I promise you the other person is not going to go, oh, okay, yeah, thanks for that reminder. They're going to get upset. I was at Denver Airport and my flight was canceled, and about 40 of us, it was delayed for 4 hours, it was finally canceled, about 40 of us went over to the counter, and the woman was totally overwhelmed. And I have to say, the people on the plane who wanted to get on the plane were not bad at all. And she stood up and she goes, I need everyone to calm down. And let me tell you, that threw fuel on the fire. I was working at a company and they said, we never say calm down. We just say you need to relax. And so also do not use slang that means the exact same thing as calm down. And interestingly, in terms of jargon and abstract language, what research shows is when you use it, we tend to believe that you're lying more often than when you use concrete, specific language. Number two, pet peeves. And the reality is we all have things that make us crazy. And guess what? When you're in customer service, you can't let it bother you. So the first thing is to be aware. And then the second thing is to try to let it go. And it's hard. We're all human beings. Interestingly, when you research the most common annoyances and pet peeves of people, number one tends to be is people who don't cover their cough or sneeze. Makes me crazy as well. The research shows is not covering your mouth when you sneeze, chewing with your mouth open, interrupting, unconscious of personal space. We're going to talk about that, proxemics, when you're too close to me. Grammar is also a big one. So think about this in terms of how you offer your customer service. And let me tell you, I don't think anybody should be chewing gum when they're at work. I was told one time I chew like a cow, and that was the last time I have ever chewed gum in public. Now, if you are a grammar Nazi, this is none of your business. You're horrified, but it is not your business. But guess what? In customer service, this is your business. You have this sign in your parking lot. This is not good customer service. Or is this? There's a very big difference between fine and fined. Back to this. This is another thing to think about. There's some people, especially older people, that this can be a pet peeve. Again, look at your rules. This is one of mine, when everybody's on their phone. And it amazes me that I have been customers in retail stores where people have pulled their phone out of the pocket while they're waiting on me and checked it. Another thing that's one of my pet peeves, and FYI if you're a business who does this, I do not like receiving email or snail mail that I have not requested. The next one, first impressions. So important. One of the most important things that we are going to discuss. We need to look at how to make a good first impression. We have one chance. That's it. And this is my thing. If you know you're going to bite someone's head off and not offer the best customer service, either try to stay behind the scenes or don't come in work. Because if you blow your first impression, you're going to be in trouble. And it starts even before I come into your business. This is an overwhelming, absolutely overwhelming business card. And also, I've met people even at social events, and I said, do you have a card? And they go, oh, I don't know. And they'll pull something that was at the bottom of their purse that is stained and wrinkled and hand it to me. Not a good first impression. Before I even call you, I formed a first impression about how I find you online. If your phone number isn't on your home page, that's a negative first impression. Then I call you, and the person who answers the phone is cranky. Bad first impression. The stats vary, but I just read recently it takes 3 seconds. But in general, I've read between 7 and 17 seconds of meeting someone to form a first impression. This is not on your stellar personality. This is on a few different things, including your physical appearance and your attitude. Another first impression that generally really upsets people is having a phone tree. And I have to tell you, I called a credit card company a few weeks ago, and I talked to 6 levels of phone tree before I could talk to a person. And finally, I will be honest, I yelled the F word because I was so frustrated and I got to talk to someone. So that is my new trick. But if you have a phone tree, FYI, by the time your customers get to a live person, they won't be as nice to that live person, which isn't fair. I go into your office and you have a total pit of an office, and people who have offices like this say, well, I know how to find everything. But guess what? I look at it and I'm a little nervous. If you want to build a lasting trust, you need to be acutely aware of your first impression. 55% of a person's opinion is determined by your physical appearance. Is that fair? Absolutely not, but it is reality. You know that we do that. So I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about the handshake. I am one of those people that I'm a hugger, and I know everybody doesn't appreciate that, but I'm a toucher, and so I definitely will either hug you or shake your hand when I meet you the first time. The second time, I'm definitely hugging you, but oftentimes the first time, I will shake your hand. So let's talk a little bit about this, because it really does affect, even though I wish it didn't, it does affect my opinion depending on how you shake. So are you a person that just grabs a few fingers, or are you doing the bone crusher? That's not giving me a positive first impression. So here's some things to think about. You want smooth, swift, and confident. You want to do palm to palm. Look the person in the eye. Hold a firm but not too tight grip. The bone crusher is not happening, you guys. And then that is a positive, great first impression. Also, you need to have a genuine smile, and we're going to talk in a little bit about what is a good smile and what is a fake smile. You want to start your first impression with a positive opening statement. And think about that. If I come into your office and I say, hi, this is my first appointment, and the receptionist goes, oh my God, it's so hot out there. Whoa, she's complaining from the get-go. So be very careful about that. First impressions include so many things. If you have dead plants in your office, if the phone rings 28 times, and yes, I actually counted at a business 28 times before someone answered. Dirty baseboards, those are the things I know how to judge. That is not impressive to me. If I pull into your parking lot and it's an absolute pit, that is a negative first impression. If you have inadequate signage, I get very frustrated. This is excellent signage. I was working with a bank, and I went through the front door, and there were sticky fingerprints on the lower part of the front door, which I'm sure from the height was a kid. And when I went in, I said, ooh, your front door is so nasty. And they go, oh, is it? We're not allowed to go in through our front door, so we never see it. Well, you need to. Take a walk around your building and check out what your customers see. So again, it includes so many different things. The gal with the pink hair, For me, that would be the best first impression ever, because that hair absolutely makes me happy. But it's not going to work for everyone. It's probably not going to work if you hire a CPA to defend you in front of the IRS and she walks in with this. Even having a cold can be a negative first impression. Fingernails, absolutely. I was staying at a very high-end hotel. There was a problem with my bill. I called up and they said, "Do you remember who helped you?" And I said, "All I remember is she had black fingernail polish on, and every single nail, it was chipped halfway down." That is not a good first impression. This look is popular for a lot of people, but again, in certain fields, this is not going to be a positive first impression. So if you're in HR, you need to really think about these things. One of the companies I work with has the most amazingly, I called it anal, list of what employees can and can't wear, but I have to tell you, they are a 5-star organization, and so they say, this is how long your fingernails can be, this is what color, this is the size of your earrings. They really care about first impressions. I love when I go into a building, generally they're health centers, and there is something in front, a hand sanitizer. And I think that's very nice and above and beyond. It's a positive first impression. Look at the difference between walking up this walkway and when there's plants. Totally different feeling. Now, my friend Rich told me about this. He used to work at an organization that had a combination break room and time clock room, and the door that you went out of, he had a mirror on it, and he had written on it, "What do our customers see?" So as you're pushing open the door, you're glancing in the mirror, and you can see if you have a cranky face or not. And I love that idea. A bank that I work with has little round mirrors stuck behind the counters that the employees can see, but the customers can't. And we kind of unconsciously, when we look in a mirror, just smile, and that is good. The initial information I gain from someone, we take it more seriously than we do later information. We actually believe that the first things we learn are the truth. So earlier I talked about if you have a negative first impression, it takes 12 subsequent visits of you being lovely before people think, okay, they might be nice. But there's something called the halo effect. What the halo effect means is if I meet you and the first time you are really lovely, and I like you a lot, and the second, third, and fourth time you're not so great, what I think is you're an amazing person, but you're just having a bad day. So this is what you want to cultivate, the halo effect. You want people upon the first impression to think you are wonderful. How I feel about myself after I leave your organization is how I feel about you and your business. You want to cultivate positive first impression. Not listening. I think listening is kind of a lost art, and I love this quote. The most basic of all human needs is a need to understand and be understood. The best way to understand people is to listen to them. And I promise, simply by improving your listening skills, you will dramatically improve your customer service skills. So let's talk a bit about listening. Two main purposes. Yes, you're taking in information, but I think sometimes what's even more important is you're bearing witness to another person. You're acknowledging them and affirming them as a human being. And we love when people listen to us. So when you talk about listening with customer service, look at the benefits of it. You're showing that you respect them. You're listening to a different perspective. You're getting insight and context. So having great listening skills, I promise you, will lead to better customer service. Now, they estimate that 75% of the information that we hear is either ignored, misunderstood, or forgotten. That is a lot of information. So one of my tips is if you are giving a customer 3, 4, 5 or more things to do, put it down on a piece of paper, bullet it, and hand it to the customer. When my brother got his wisdom teeth taken out, We picked him up and we said, what do you need to do next? And he goes, I don't even know. I just woke up from sedation. And so I called and she goes, I told him. And I said, you need to give him a bulleted list. He was sedated. Here's a great example. My friend's son, Mark, came to her. He was in absolute misery. He had some braces put on earlier in the week and he was in agony. And they said to him, if the braces rub on your cheek, put this little kind of sticky gel on it and it will help. So she looks inside his cheek and it is rubbed raw. And she said, did you put the wax on it? And he said he did, but it wouldn't stick to his cheek. Now the dentist assumed Mark knew to put it on his braces at the spot that was causing the abrasion. But Mark actually put it where it hurt. So that's a perfect example of giving information and having it absolutely misunderstood. Now another stat is they estimate that we generally listen about 17 seconds at a time, and then we start thinking about something else. And it doesn't mean we're going to think about something else for the next 10 minutes, but we kind of flit in and out in general on listening. Now here's a very scary stat that I read from Harvard Business, totally legit. What they found is physicians interrupt 69% of patient interviews within 18 seconds of the patient beginning to speak. And so as a result, in 77% of the interviews, the patient's true reason for visiting was never elicited. So effective listening is also a significant predictor for patient satisfaction. We like our physicians more if they listen. If you're cutting us off, it's a problem for both of us. It's a problem that you're not helping me get what I need, and I'm frustrated with you. So the next one is reminding us that listening is a choice. I know that some people, and I actually have to tell you, sometimes I used to think I had a hearing problem, but it's just a listening problem. So a few things about listening. It's not just simply being quiet or waiting your turn to talk. Just because you're sitting there and not saying anything does not mean you are listening. Now there's something called a rebuttal tendency, and it's while you're trying to develop your counter argument while the speaker is still speaking. It means you're not listening, you're simply waiting your turn. Interestingly, 2% of the population in the United States has any formal training on listening. Isn't that amazing? People act like it's just an innate skill that we're born with. I actually do with the California Agriculture Leadership Association. For the last 8 years, I've done a training solely on listening. They understand the importance. You also need to listen all the way to the end. Don't assume. And I've talked to receptionists. I've been here 30 years. They don't even need to say more than 3 words, and I know what they want. That is not good. So a few listening obstacles to think about. We all have emotional and mental filters, that different prejudice, agendas, feelings we have, preconceived ideas, that when someone walks in and they look a certain way and they start talking a certain way, we make assumptions. And be very careful of that because it will stop you from listening. Personal things. For example, if we're scared, if we're tired, if we're hungry, or if we're stressed, we're not going to be listening. This is important. When I used to do HIV testing, we would give them information before we drew their blood, not when we gave them the results the next week. Because we knew once we gave them results, positive or negative, they would stop listening. Visual. And I have a sad/interesting/amusing story I'm going to tell you about this picture.
I'm doing a training with an organization, and I met one of the managers in his office to ask him a series of questions. And when I'm talking to someone, I like to kind of look around and check out their office. So after a few minutes, I started to do that. And I saw, and let me just tell you, much to my horror, a picture that seemed to be homemade, and it was a glamour shot of what I was assuming was his wife. Now, glamour shots were popular in the 80s, and they included a lot of hair, a lot of cleavage, and a lot of feathers, and a come hither look. Totally inappropriate for the workplace. And I stopped listening. I absolutely was so transfixed by that picture. I was trying to sneak a glance at it without appearing obvious, kind of just stretching my head and looking over, that I didn't listen to anything that Steve said. And I met with the CEO later, and I said I had met with Steve. She goes, "In his office?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Did you see the picture?" I said, "Yeah. You cannot have that picture in the office. It is absolutely distracting. It is a conversation stopper." So think about what you have. Even if you have an amazing view out the window, it's going to stop people from listening. What are you doing right now that is a barrier to listening?
If you're poorly organized, the person is going to stop listening. If you give too much information, the person is going to stop listening. Guess what? I'm a smart woman. I know nothing about cars. So I just want to know how much it's going to cost. I do not need to know the history of my car and all about my engine. There are gender differences with listening. And generally, it's the guys who are kind of made fun of not listening well. So I just want to talk a little bit about this because I really think it can help relationships simply by understanding a few things. When listening, women make more noises, while more masculine people tend to be silent. So think about how many times you have been on the phone with the opposite sex and they say, "Are you still there?" And I never say that with a woman because the woman's going, oh, yeah. And the man tends to be totally quiet. Now, another interesting thing is women have listening nonverbals. And when we're listening, we tend to nod. And what's important is that you don't take that nodding as agreement. You take it as listening. And when I did a presentation recently with physicians, we did a thing. I said, "Okay, tell me something," and they were talking to me, and I was looking at them and nodding. And I said, "So you think I'm going to do what you suggested?" And they go, "Yeah." I said, "Why do you say that?" And they said, "Well, you were nodding." I said, "No, I was nodding because I was listening." So understand, nodding does not necessarily mean agreement.
My friend Diane Auden is an amazing speaker on communication. That is her background. And once when I was listening to her speak, she talked about the difference between male and female communication, that men are linear thinkers and women are circular, which means men tend to get to the point more and women tend to talk around things. And it's true, don't you think? I mean, when you think about it, women actually bond by chit-chat, and men don't do that. So I think we need to really understand how the other sex communicates so we can work well together. I know that when I write a friend an email, a girlfriend an email, it will be this long and I feel absolutely comfortable sending it. When I send an email to a guy, I write that much and then edit it down to about this much. Because if I have a simple question, I do not need to tell 82 stories and bond with the person before I send it. So think about linear versus circular in your everyday communications, personally and professionally.
So to summarize what I just told you, here's a perfect thing for men to learn. If you ever want to know what a woman's mind feels like, imagine a browser with 2,857 tabs open all the time. Then you will understand this. So finally, remember, there's a big difference between showing interest and really taking interest. Simply being quiet is not enough. Your nonverbals are so important, and we're going to talk about that next session. On that note, thanks again, and I will be talking to you soon.